The Hummer EV pickup truck now has an SUV little sibling, this right here, the 2024 GMC EV SUV. We are getting to experience the SUV here in California on the road, a little bit off-roading, dealing with some pretty terrible weather. But I'm really excited to compare this with the pickup truck. We spent a lot of time with that off-roading and on-road, living with it, and see some of the similarities and some of the differences. From the ground up, these were designed together, and the SUV is smaller, bit more maneuverable, bit more nimble, has some better capabilities in terms of off-road breakover angles because of the size difference. In terms of the propulsion system, all the Hummer EVs are on GM's Ultium platform, which is their modular EV platform. This has 20 of those modules double stacked for the battery pack. That's a bit less than a truck, which then yields slightly less horsepower and torque. Still very healthy at 830 horsepower and 1,200 pound-feet of torque. With Watts to Freedom mode, the SUV will do 0 to 60 in 3.5 seconds versus the 1,000 horsepower truck, which will do 0 to 60 in 3 seconds. All of those numbers are staggering for something of this size and magnitude. Obviously, as an EV, the range is also quite important, and with those 20 battery modules on the SUV, GM is estimating 300 miles of range for this versus 350 for the truck, which does have a slightly bigger battery pack. Important another number is the fast charging. 100 miles in about 14 minutes. That is a pretty good rate. There are also going to be several different iterations of the Hummer EV SUV. This is a top-of-the-line Edition 1 at the get-go. It's got the tri-motor setup, which means the most amount of power, most amount of torque, the fastest. There will be entry-level versions for a dual motor, so a bit less power, a bit less range, and so forth. But we're getting to drive at launch the Edition 1, which is the top of the line, a really cool one. So with that, let's get into this video. We're gonna do some driving on the road, get to experience it off-roading, check out the exterior, how it compares to the truck and some of the differences and different packages you can get with the SUV. Let's check out the interior. How does that compare to the truck? It's pretty similar, and we'll talk about the value. We have a variety of different Hummer SUVs lined up here for some off-roading demo shortly. We can take a look at the exterior. So this one here actually is plugged in, charging another Hummer EV SUV. That's pretty cool. And you'll note the charging status indicator lights up front, just like on the truck. They use the blue DRLs to show the status. Really cool touch. And we have lots of different color combinations too. We've got black ones with a nice splattering of mud on there. Another black one, white one. But this one is the Moonshot Green Metallic for the Edition 1, which looks really cool. That was when we were driving up. I think it's my favorite color combo for the SUV so far. With this Hummer SUV parked here, you can see the rear wheel steering. So with Crabwalk, the rear wheels would turn in the same directions as the front. And you can see how much of an angle those rear wheels would turn, which really helps with maneuverability and also allows this thing to do Crabwalk, which is just always fun. It's a bizarre feeling because the back end of the truck is like pivoting more than you're used to. But I've said this before, rear wheel steering is one of my favorite features of the Hummer EV for the truck and the SUV. You can see the difference between the 22-inch wheels on the Edition 1 and the Edition 1 with the Extreme Off-Road package, those 18-inch wheels with much more aggressive tires, 35-inch tires, and also comes with underbody shields and more protective stuff for the Extreme Off-Road package, and I think extra camera angles underneath for ultra view. It's pretty cool. So up front, the Hummer SUV is identical to the truck. You have that light signature with the Hummer lettering inside. Just a very, very aggressive front end. It's absolutely massive. We have the blacked out GMC badge down here. Tow hooks. Good amount of ground clearance. The Edition 1 comes with 22-inch wheels, side steps, and you can also option onto the Extreme Off-Road package, which brings 18-inch wheels and 35-inch tires, as you can see on this one here, which has been clearly playing around in the mud. We'll see that shortly. The wheelbase is significantly shorter on the SUV, 9 inches shorter than the truck, and overall length is 20 inches shorter. So that means it's much more maneuverable. I personally like the proportions more on the SUV than the truck itself, but from essentially here forward, the truck and SUV are identical. Let's go ahead and check out the interior of this Hummer EV SUV. Power on. So we have the large infotainment screen, the full digital cluster. You see the Super Cruise indicator light cycling through. From up here, it is essentially identical to the pickup truck. The big difference is this interior color theme has a green touch to it to match the exterior moonshot matte. You have these bronze accents for the Edition 1. Same thing on those air vents. But this entire center infotainment area, your center stack, wireless phone charger, transmission, drive selector, your mode selector, all of this is the exact same as the pickup truck, which means pretty awesome. I love that we have actual toggle buttons through their physical. And you toggle that, the screen changes, but this is not a touchscreen component. You then use these toggles to turn on your heated seat or your cooled seat. So it's reconfigurable, but it's all interfaced through an actual physical toggle system. We have wireless Apple CarPlay. We can pull up vehicle info, all sorts of off-road information, which is really awesome. There's a bunch of different camera angles too. With the Extreme Off-Road pack, it adds even more. But there is so much tech on the Hummer EV. Full digital cluster has amazing animations, awesome visuals when you change your different drive modes. Tons of information too. You can see more of that moon theme with the texture around the edges. Again, steering wheel, same as the truck. This one does have Super Cruise, which is pretty awesome. Steering wheel is also heated. And then, yes, this material, on the truck edition one, it was the white and black theme, whereas this one's got this green textured vinyl all over it. It definitely feels quality and premium, but also extremely rugged and can handle getting wet and muddy. We got these extremely muddy during this weekend. Just like on the truck, you also have the removable roof panels, the infinity roof. These can come out and store in the front trunk, and you still have this I-bar here. The rear window can go down, but you also see that giant fifth spare behind, which is why the digital rear view camera is also fantastic. Second row space is pretty good. I've been sitting back there during this weekend. Only 2 rows, and the back is all the trunk, which we need to show one final feature. A couple other interior touches. You can see that giant storage space under the center console because we don't have any sort of powertrain transmission components there. So packaging wise, with a flat battery cell in the motors, you can have this type of flexibility. This is also kind of the Hummer front grille design. On the speaker grills, we've got more of the moon topography, the little boot, a lot of little Easter eggs all over the Hummer SUV. Have a little one in the corner of the windshield right there. And then coming around back, we can open the power tailgate by pressing that button, and it swings open on its own, which is pretty impressive because it has a full-size spare back here. Full wheel and tire, 22-inch. That has to be quite heavy. Opens up, and you've got a good amount of space. Got a bunch of camera gear, luggage, but it's a very high load floor. So to be able to get in there and load stuff up, even though it has adjustable height air suspension, that's going to be not so great for short people. But good amount of space here in the trunk. We just press that button again, and it swings it shut. In the Hummer EV SUV on the road, we are on the freeway experiencing Super Cruise, which is GM's extremely advanced, hands-free on mapped roads driver assistant system. And in the Hummer EV, it's the top level that they have, which means it can change lanes on its own. It can speed up, slow down. It's very good at following the lane. And there's 200,000 miles of mapped roads. They're always going to be freeways, divided freeways for Super Cruise, but it honestly is one of the really good systems, and it's available both on the truck and on the SUV. In terms of driving, what does it feel like? Well, the Hummer EV SUV feels extremely similar to the truck. In what way are they similar? Well, they're both very large, very powerful, commanding presence on the road. Honestly, sitting in the driver's seat facing forward, it feels almost exactly the same as a truck. You don't feel that difference in size when you're just on the freeway. It's equally as wide as tall. Length is where the big differences occur between the SUV and the truck. So at 126.7 inches in wheelbase, it's nearly 9 inches shorter than the Super Truck, and also 20 inches shorter in overall length, and that is a big deal. Not only will it make it easier to park and maneuver, it assists in things like breakover angles, departure angles, because you have less of that overall size. In terms of the absolute power and performance, in most real-world situations, both the 830 horsepower in this Edition 1 SUV and the 1,000 horsepower in the Super Truck are just overwhelming. It's more than enough. Even though this thing weighs as much as an entire apartment block, it is stupendously fast. 0 to 60 is rated at 3 seconds in the truck, 3.5 in the SUV, and when you launch it with watts of freedom, yes, it's going to be crazy. Squeal the tires and it just goes. You squat, you're pointing at the moon, and you just take off. But where these two differ in terms of power that I think I can feel is at freeway speeds, higher speeds, when you do plant your foot on the throttle's not appropriate, the go pedal, the accelerator, right? It does seem to be a little bit slower. Now, there is likely a weight advantage for the SUV, but that 200 horsepower difference is 20%. And it's definitely noticeable. Not saying the SUV is slow by any means. It's faster than anything this size should be. I mean, 3.5 seconds for something of this size. I mean, that's supercar levels of performance, right? It's still ridiculous, but not quite as quick if you're looking for all-out straight-line performance. We do need to talk about that torque figure that GM has loved to push out, that 11,500 pound-feet. That is a little bit of numerical mathematical trickery. It has to do with multiplication through the drivetrain. Well, not drivetrain really, it's just a final ratio, right? And it's at the wheels. If you use the same type of math, like a heavy-duty Silverado with a Duramax or something would be making 14,000 pound-feet of torque. So in reality, it's somewhere between, I think, 1,000 to 1,200 pound-feet at the motor, which is obviously massive. And the advantage of being an electric vehicle is you get that instant power and torque at zero. It just hits. So there's no waiting for any turbos to spool up, not waiting for your transmission to drop in the right gear. It just goes all the time. So it's instantaneous power, instantaneous response. With the EV platform, you can send max power to a single wheel because you have that flexibility using the electric motors, right? You have an E-diff out back because there's two electric motors. You can just tell them to try to sync up power delivery and it simulates an electronic differential. Whereas the front with the extreme off-road package, you get an actual mechanical differential up front. Now with the SUV and eventually through the rest of the lineup, there are different iterations of motor packages. This top tier edition one is the tri-motor, which is max power. There are lower tier ones, the 2 and 2X and so forth, that will only have dual motor, but those are still 625 horsepower, which is obviously a very healthy amount of power. In terms of capabilities, this thing is able to beat out the Super Truck in breakover angles, departure angles. This can ford up to 2 feet of water. All the capability is definitely there, and honestly, in the segment, which is really a segment of 2, it's the best. We're actually approaching some curvier roads in the Hummer EV SUV. Again, not where this is necessarily at home, but given the width and size and weight of this thing, it actually can handle its size pretty well, and I attribute a significant amount of that to the rear wheel steering. Rear wheel steering is fantastic, and they took it to the next level with the Hummer EV. The magnitude at which the rear wheels can turn is seriously impressive, which enables things like Crabwalk, right? That it's a little gimmicky, it's really fun, it feels bizarre, and it's intended when you're off-roading to get you around obstacles. It allows the rear wheels to turn at max amount of angle with the front wheels and essentially pivot the whole car sideways. You kind of shuffle, hence Crabwalk. Now, in other use cases, when you turn the rear wheels in the opposite direction of the front, you're virtually shortening the wheelbase, which helps with maneuverability. This is a very big, large vehicle. Even though it is smaller than a truck, that's like saying something smaller than a Titanic. It doesn't really mean that much. It's still massive, right? But with rear wheel steering, it actually is quite maneuverable in terms of parking, trying to get it into a parking space, or flipping U-turns. So they use technology like that to really allow this thing to be much more livable despite its scale. We also have things like extraction mode, which raises suspension, air suspension to max ride height to really get out of stuck situations. This thing is just a technological showcase. Beyond the Ultium battery packs, the modular system there where this says 20 versus more in the truck, beyond Super Cruise, it's literally pretty much every single form of technological application to allow this thing to conquer all sorts of terrains while still going down the drag strip at a speed faster than many, many sports cars. It does a bit of everything really well, and in that way, it's really appealing because it's so beyond everything else, right? A lot of times EVs were pitched to be efficient, right? More efficient, better for the environment. This is the most Hummer of EVs. It doesn't really care about any of that. It doesn't really care about its efficiency in using its batteries, right? If you actually had some sort of metric, which industry has not seemed to push out yet, this would likely be the least, actually, outside of the Hummer EV Super Truck, this is the least efficient EV out there because it that's not the goal. That's not the intent of this. This is a halo vehicle, just like the Super Truck. I'm certain there will be more practical GMC EVs and GM EVs coming, Silverado, Sierra, things like that. But they launched with a Hummer because they wanted to make a splash for sure. In terms of value, the SUV does start at a lower price point compared to the truck, a bit more entry level. You do have lower power packages, it's smaller, less range, so it does make sense. So the base Hummer EV SUV will start at $79,995, just under $80,000. And as you go up the tiers, you add more power, more range, more capability. To the top of the line here, this Edition 1, what we're launching with, that starts at $105,995. So low $100,000 range, you add some options on like the extreme off-road package or things like that. But what can you actually get one of these in the real world market for? That's gonna be an interesting question. We don't know. Market demand yields higher pricing. These are gonna be in demand because they're like sold out for the next year or something like that. What can you actually get one for? Who knows, maybe 150 grand, we'll see. Is it worth it? That's hard to argue with the dealer markup and resale values and things like that. At its price at $100,000, does this deliver a $100,000 experience? I think it does, because it adds so much of the wow factor. It looks unlike anything else on the road. It has plenty of capability and literally just puts a big grin on your face, and that's what you're looking for in your big SUV. You got to try one of these. The only competitor that this sort of has is the Rivian R1S, I guess, but it's not really a true competitor. It just happens to be another electric SUV that's also off-road capable. I haven't driven the R1S, but I have driven the R1T, so I can try to extrapolate what it may feel like. The Rivian is extremely fast, very capable, but it has a completely different feel to it. The personality seems very different. So that's why I don't think it's really a direct competitor. Rivian likes to talk about their vegan interiors and how you can take it camping, and there's a flashlight in the door. Whereas this has all the moon and space themes with watts to freedom, let's do launch control and all that type of stuff. The Crabwalk. It doesn't really speak to me the same way that the Rivian brand and vehicles seem to. So really it's kind of in its space of itself. It probably will compete against the actual truck too, the Hummer EV pickup truck. Maybe when Mercedes comes out with the EQG, their electrified G-Class, that would bring some competition. But ultimately, this is a halo vehicle for the GMC brand as they go into the electrified future, also with GM, really leveraging the Ultium platform. And we've seen it packaged in so many different ways, from the Lyriq to this. We'll see the Silverado EV coming, the Equinox, the Blazer. This modular platform allows them to do everything from a flagship luxury like the Celestiq to this ridiculous off-road EV super truck SUV thing. It's fun. Puts a big smile on your face. It's been pretty cool to experience the SUV. The takeaways are it feels remarkably similar to the truck, to be expected, and which means it's hilarious, absolutely hilarious. Hope you guys enjoyed this first drive and review of the Hummer EV SUV. Thanks for watching.